Hello, 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 and welcome back to the Ashley Beeman Show. I'm excited today because we're going to be diving into a hot topic. And if you follow me on Instagram and you follow my Instagram stories, you might have heard me rant about this over the past couple weeks. And honestly, I want to go in depth with this topic and really explain the science to you so that you can fully understand how this works. So, the topic that we're going to be diving into that is highly misunderstood, especially in the days of social media and gaining attention and wanting engagement, is calorie deficits. Because I don't know who needs to hear this, but the only way for you to lose fat is for you to be in a calorie deficit. And yet, social media is filled with people acting like that's not true. I am calling BS on this noise, and I want to break this down so that you can stop being manipulated and you can start being educated, so that you can start understanding how fat loss and weight loss works and how you can create a lifestyle that will actually work for you. Because I feel like we're so confused on what works and what doesn't work. And if we can really educate ourselves on nutrition, on different things, on the science behind why things work, it allows us to make better decisions to reach the goals that we want to make. So first and foremost, let's just dive into it, right? What is a calorie deficit? So let's start with the basics. A calorie deficit is when you consume fewer calories than your body needs to maintain its current weight. So whatever weight that you are currently maintaining, you're not gaining, you're not losing, the amount of calories that you're consuming on a daily basis is your maintenance calories. So you could continue to eat that many calories and you could continue to maintain your weight. Now, most of the time, I am going to say that your maintenance calories, which we're not going to talk about today, but I do want to just give you a little background, is going to be a bit of a range. Same with your maintenance weight. But let's say that you want to lose weight, you want to lose fat. A calorie deficit is when you consume fewer calories than your maintenance calories. That's it. That's the science. That's how fat loss happens. I could literally stop this episode right now, but because there is so much confusion in the online space, I want to go deeper. I want you to understand this better. Your body starts to pull energy from stored fat to make up the difference from the lack of calories. So if your body needs, like I said, 2,000 calories a day to maintain where you're at, and you start eating 1,700 calories consistently over a few weeks, you're going to be in a deficit. And over time, you're going to start to lose weight. You're going to start to see that scale weight go down. Now, this is a very simple way of explaining a calorie deficit. There is still nuance to it, which we're going to get into as we go further into this episode. So that's literally the definition of a calorie deficit. And that's how every single person who has ever lost fat has done it, whether they've tracked or not. If somebody says that they have lost weight without being in a calorie deficit, my question to them is, how do you know you weren't in a calorie deficit? That's literally the definition of a calorie deficit, is weight loss, right? So if you're losing weight, you are in a calorie deficit. So let me share how this has been proven and how to kind of break this down and explain this in a little bit more of a simple way. So if you were put on a deserted island, this is one of my favorite examples. If someone was stranded on a deserted island with no food, they would lose weight. It doesn't matter if they had PCOS, it doesn't matter if they had Hashimoto's, a slow metabolism, thyroid issues, gut issues, hormone issues. They could be full of toxins. I had somebody say that to me once too, like a calorie deficit doesn't work because my body is full of toxins. If you were not eating any food, or you were only eating enough to barely survive, you are going to lose fat. You are going to lose weight. It does not matter what is going on with your body. Your body has to use stored energy to survive, so therefore it's going to release the weight. This is how we know a calorie deficit actually works. Always, like a calorie deficit always works. So when I hear a calorie deficit doesn't work for me, what I'm really hearing is I think I'm in a calorie deficit, but I'm not. I haven't been consistent long enough. I'm misjudging my intake, or I'm dealing with chronic stress under you're under some like recovery or hormone chaos from years of yo-yo dieting. It's not that the deficit doesn't work. It's that the approach that you're using isn't creating one for you, or your body is so stressed and downregulated that it's fighting back. But even if your body was stressed and downregulated and you started eating 500 calories a day, you're still going to lose weight. I think I've made that like very black and white and very clear that no matter what, if you get into a calorie deficit, you're going to lose weight. Does that mean that it's easy for every single person to get into a calorie deficit? No, absolutely not. There are lots of factors that determine what your calorie deficit is compared to everybody else. Every single body is different. So let's get this straight. A calorie deficit is a universal concept, but the number is different for every single person and every single body. One person might be in a calorie deficit with 2,200 calories, while another might need to eat 1,400 or 1,200 calories to get into that calorie deficit. It really depends on your body size, the composition, whether you have more fat, more muscle, your activity level, your dieting history, your stress, your sleep, your hormones, and more. So all of that is the nuanced part of a calorie deficit. But again, a calorie deficit always works. There's no one size fits all number. So like if you saw your favorite influencer say this is what they're eating in a calorie deficit with 1,600 calories and they lost weight, that's their deficit. It doesn't mean that it's yours. And this is why I teach my clients how to find out their own numbers, or I help them find out their own numbers and not just follow somebody else's plan. It's the same thing when you do like an online calculator. There are plenty of online macro calculators, calorie calculators that you could plug in your weight, your height, your activity level, all of those things, and it will spit out a number. But most of the time, that's just a guesstimate. You're not going to know if that calorie deficit is going to work for you or not because it's nuanced, right? The amount of calories that your body burns on a daily basis is going to be different from each person. So one of the things that I like to have my clients do in order to figure out where their calorie deficit actually is first we need to find out where their maintenance calories are. So I will have them, when they first come to me, I will have them track their calories. We're not like working towards a target or anything like that. I simply just want them to put everything that they're eating into some kind of tracking app, whether it be MyFitnessPal or Chronometer or something like that, so that we can get an idea of how many calories they're currently consuming. Because when we can get that idea, then we can start to slowly put them into a calorie deficit instead of just guessing. This is why you'll hear a lot like, putting people like on a 1,200 calorie deficit isn't for everybody. It really depends. Like if you're currently eating 2,200 calories and you're maintaining that weight and I put you to 1,200 calories, the problem with that is, and I wasn't really planning on getting into detail of this too much, but I think that it goes right along with what we're talking about. The problem with that is it's too low of a deficit, which we're going to talk about in a second. But what happens is that your body will adapt to that deficit. So then your deficit needs to be lower. But again, a calorie deficit always works. So we don't want to drop the calories down too low because eventually, no matter what, every single person on a weight loss journey, a fat loss journey is going to hit a plateau. Then you have to create more of a deficit in order to start see results, or you have to reverse out of that deficit. You have to get to a maintenance phase for a little bit before you can go back into a fat loss phase. But this is why we want to find out where your maintenance is so we can slowly start taking calories away and not have big drastic changes. I always like to make the least amount of changes to see the most results because that's going to be the most sustainable way to lose weight and keep it off. So there are times where calorie deficits aren't always appropriate. Like I was explaining, your body likes to adapt to things. It doesn't like to be under stress. When you put your body into a calorie deficit, it's under stress. So what it tries to do is it tries to get back to homeostasis and be adapted to that. That's why we hit plateaus. But just because a calorie deficit works doesn't mean that everybody should be on one. Let me say that again. A calorie deficit is a tool. It is not a lifestyle. I see so many companies, I see so many plans out there selling fat loss phases as lifestyles, and that's just not the truth. A fat loss phase is not meant to be a lifestyle. A calorie deficit is not something that you're meant to live in for a long period of time. And a lot of times when I teach my clients this, it allows them to really see the bigger picture and realize that this fat loss phase is just a short period of time that they're going to have to be in a calorie deficit. Once they've reached their goal weight, we can start to reverse them out of a calorie deficit and more into a lifestyle. So there are seasons for fat loss and there are seasons for maintenance, muscle building, healing, and reverse dieting. But here's when you probably, I'm not going to go through all of those phases. And in fact, I think I've done a podcast episode on all of those phases. If I can find it, I will link it below, but it's somewhere probably at the end of last year. But here's when you shouldn't be in a deficit. So if you've been chronically dieting for years and your body is screaming for a break, it's adapted, it's under a lot of stress, it's time to come out of that calorie deficit for a while, even if you're not at your goal weight. Because what is going to happen is you're going to end up having a rebound effect anyways, and you're going to probably end up gaining a lot of weight back, and you're not going to want to do that. So it's not healthy to be in a calorie deficit for a long period of time. Another reason why you shouldn't be in a deficit is if you're eating super low already and you're already feeling exhausted, you're binge eating, or you're obsessing over food, it's probably time to step into, reverse out of it, get into a maintenance phase, and just kind of allow your body to recover. If you've got massive stress, poor sleep, your body is inflamed, or it's under recovered, or you have health issues or hormone issues, that is not the time to be going into a calorie deficit. You want to work on probably a health phase. If that's the case, get your body to recover and get into a place to where you can go into a calorie deficit. If you're trying to build muscle or you're trying to heal your relationship with food, a calorie deficit is not a spot for you. Trying to force a deficit in any of those seasons is absolutely going to backfire every single time. This is why people continue to yo-yo diet. We are only focused a lot of the times on wanting to see the fat loss. We don't think about the bigger picture, and bigger picture, what I'm talking about is like health. We're thinking about habits. We're thinking about the way that we feel, the way that our body is working and processing. The answer isn't always a calorie deficit. Sometimes it's being in a maintenance phase for a bit, building up those habits, letting our body recover before we can start to go into that fat loss phase. I like to say you need to earn your way into a fat loss phase. This is why sustainability matters. You can't always be in a cut, and that's why and that's what diet culture sells you. And that's exactly what keeps you stuck, because it continues to backfire on you over and over and over again. So social media has this twisted. Let's be real. Social media is flooded with confusing and conflicting info. And there's a whole trend now of like how calorie deficits don't work. And it's usually people trying to sell you a new protocol, a supplement, or some kind of like metabolic healing method that sounds really fancy, but it's just not. It's not rooted in reality. And if you're losing weight on any of those things that those people are selling you, you are in a calorie deficit. Here's the thing. Some of them mean well, but many are preying on your frustration, and they're manipulating you, and they're spinning you into confusion so that you think that you need them. And I come from a place of growing a business on social media, of growing and getting clients on social media. And this is how I provide income to my family. And this is how I help people, is from getting my clients on social media. But there are some good people out there, and there's just some people who are just selling nonsense and BS that's only keeping you stuck. And for the longest time, like, I didn't want to start calling people out or calling these things out. I just kind of wanted to stay in my own lane. But it gets to a point where I have people coming to me and like just completely confused about how weight loss works and fat loss works. And so I think that we have to call these things out in order for people to really be educated and move forward. So if you've been stuck, it doesn't mean that calories don't count. It means that there's more going on that needs to be addressed, but that doesn't change the fact that fat loss still requires a calorie deficit. You deserve real answers and not fear-based marketing. So you all sent me a bunch of questions for this episode. And so I'm going to answer those now, and then we're going to wrap up the episode. So how do you know if you're in a calorie deficit? So basically, you'll know you're in a calorie deficit if you start seeing changes in your body. If your measurements change, if your clothes start fitting looser, if you can take pictures and you can see that things are different, if the scale is moving down. It's not just the scale, but consistency over weeks, not just days, is key. Usually what I am finding is it takes people about 3 or 4 weeks of consistently being in a calorie deficit to start to see that scale move down. And we don't hear this as the norm. We hear get into a calorie deficit and you're going to lose 1 to 2 pounds a week. And that should be the average. I literally hate that. And if you've listened to any of my past episodes, you know that I hate that. I wish we would throw away that average because every single body is different. Every single body is going to respond differently. But what I know for sure is that consistency over a long period of time always works. And the more consistent you can be, the more that we can see the data and what needs to change in order for you to see the results that you want to see. Number two, the second question that I got was, can I be in a calorie deficit and not lose weight? Technically, no. If you're truly in a deficit, fat loss is going to happen. But I will say that scale weight will tend to fluctuate with things like water retention, digestion, hormones, or inconsistent tracking. But this is why I like to take weekly averages. Personally, I like when my clients weigh every single day. Some people don't like to do that. So I at least try to get them to weigh in 3 times a week so that we can take the average of that. And it's the same thing when we're looking at like an entire month, right? I like to look at the bigger picture of the month rather than just like week to week. Like, okay, you actually lost 3 pounds over this week, even though you feel like the scale hasn't moved at all, right? What is the lowest calorie amount I should ever eat? So this, there's so much controversy around this. And I used to be like the person who would be like, never dip below like 1700 calories. And honestly, I personally lost 60 pounds, probably not dipping under 1700 calories, but that did take me 3 years. And for most people, they don't want to wait 3 years. So it really is about not staying in a low number for a long period of time. So like dipping, I wouldn't dip any woman below 1200 calories. Would I put somebody at 1200 calories if they needed to? Yeah. And I think that a lot of people would disagree with that, but also I'm not going to keep somebody there for a long period of time so that like a lot of things ruin. But sometimes you do have to get a little bit lower and a little bit more aggressive in order to see that scale move. But it's not really safe to stay there for a long period of time. I would say longer than like 3 to 6 weeks. That's probably a long time that most people won't be able to stick to that. And it's most of the time it's not necessary. So less isn't always better, smarter is. There's also, I want to point out different ways to get into a calorie deficit that doesn't just require cutting your calories, right? So creating a calorie deficit can be lowering your calories and increasing your movement. So like for instance, when I go through a competition prep, those are the two things we manipulate. We manipulate my calories, we manipulate my movement. And it's not always both of them at the same time. Sometimes we will just manipulate the movement, will up my cardio, or we'll drop my calories. It'll just depend. Also, there's other ways of looking at things. So if you're having like an untracked meal at the end of the week, you could change that untracked meal to something where you're still allowing yourself to eat a little bit more and kind of indulge, but you're controlling those calories a little bit more. Because really, when we're looking at a calorie deficit, we're looking at the average over a full week. I could definitely get into calorie cycling, but I feel like that is a whole different episode for a different time. If you want me to do an episode on that, let me know and I will. But for the most part, the more consistent you can be with the calorie deficit, the more results you're going to see. So if you're dipping down to like 1400, 1200 calories and you can't stick to that, it's probably better to jump up those calories and maybe manipulate your movement a little bit more. Okay, so why did I stop losing weight even though I'm still in a deficit? So like I talked about through the episode, your body may have adapted to the lower intake. So or it could mean that you're not tracking as accurate as you think you are. And that happens way more often than not. So you have a couple options here. You have the options of adjusting your macros, increasing your movement, or maybe you just need to be more honest with yourself and really look at, are you tracking everything that you're eating? Or are you grabbing a handful of something here, a bite here, a lick here? Because all of those things tend to add up. In fact, I actually have this idea for a piece of content that I want to share to show you how that adds up. Just like over this past month, 2 months, we have had a lot of family gatherings and barbecues and things like that. And I have just noticed how it is very easy to consume like 1500 calories, 2000 calories without even noticing it. And actually, there has been a study. I don't know the exact study, so I guess I can't quote it and I can't say this, but um, it's been like proven that most people who say they eat 1,200 calories are actually eating closer to 2,200 calories. So we need to look at how accurate you're being with tracking. But if your body has actually hit a plateau, you have a few options. You can adjust those calories to go lower. You can increase your movement to create more of a deficit, or it might be time for you to reverse out of that deficit and spend some time in maintenance before going into another deficit. This is exactly how I lost 60 pounds and have kept it off for 5 years. So, like I told you, it took me 3 years to lose those 60 pounds because I wasn't always in a fat loss phase. Whenever like life would get busy or the holidays would come around, I would just reverse out of the calorie deficit, enjoy myself, allow my body to recover, and then go back into another calorie deficit. And through that process, I was able to lose the weight and keep it off. So, is it bad to track calories? Doesn't that lead to obsession? You know what? I'm so sick of hearing that too. And I used to be a person that used to scream this from the rooftop. Like calorie tracking, macro tracking is disordered and it's obsessive. But until I was really educated on what calorie tracking and macro tracking was, I was just stuck in this belief. And that's really what it is. Because honestly, tracking calories and tracking macros has given me so much freedom along with all of my clients. Tracking can be a very powerful educational tool. It's not a prison sentence and it's not meant to last forever. When used with the right mindset, it gives you the data, the awareness, and the freedom. It's not for everyone forever. Like you're not meant to track calories or macros forever. That's why if you reverse properly out of your calorie deficit, you can get to a point where you have more flexibility. You can get to a point where you can start intuitively eating, but you're laying the foundation through that fat loss phase while you're tracking your calories or your macros to learn what portion sizes look like, to understand what calories actually look like in the foods that you're eating out. Like I was talking about, like with barbecues, like understanding like grabbing a handful of chips here or some peanuts here or some chocolates here. And, like you're just kind of like snacking all day and all of a sudden you're at 3,000, 4,000 calories and you're not even aware of it. So I think that tracking macros and calories is the most like powerful tool that you can have in your tool belt because you can always go back to it. And it educates you on what nutrition looks like. It also helps you to see what your body does best with. It'll show you how you have more energy when you're eating this many calories or when you're having more carbs and you're having less fat, right? I know that, like I said, every body is different. So some bodies will do better with less carbs, some bodies will do better with more fat. With me particularly, I thrive on more carbs and less fat. That's just how my body works. But overall, balanced nutrition is important. And so having the tool of tracking, I like to think of it like this. If you wanted to fix your finances, if you wanted to save money, and if you wanted to make sure you're not spending more than you're making, you have to track your finances. Tracking your calories is no different than that. Okay, can I lose weight without tracking calories at all? Yes, you absolutely can. If you're eating less than your body needs consistently, or you're burning more than your body needs consistently, you're going to lose weight. Tracking just makes it easier for you to know what's actually happening. And it also makes it easier when you hit that plateau. So if you hit that plateau and you're not tracking calories, you don't know how much you're consuming. So you don't know what you need to like take back, right? Like you don't know what needs to change because you have no data. So I think that it is important during a fat loss phase to take time to track the data because it's only going to help you in the long run to get to where you want to go, but also maintain where you're at. Because that's the other thing is once you get to that weight loss, you're going to want to have more calories. So when you reverse properly out of the fat loss phase, you need to know where you're starting from. And if you're not tracking, you don't know those things, and it's a lot harder to sustain. Okay, the last question that I have is if I have PCOS or Hashimoto's, do calorie deficits still work for me? Fun fact, I have Hashimoto's and hypothyroid, and I lost 60 pounds using a calorie deficit. So yes, but you may have to be a little bit more strategic, more patient, and supportive with your body along the way. It doesn't change the process. It simply just changes the process. All right, that's a wrap. Here's the thing. Calorie deficits aren't magic. They're just science. They're not toxic. They're just misunderstood and they're not an enemy. people are just misusing them. If you want to learn how to actually create a deficit for you and for your body in a way that feels sustainable, supportive, and real, that's what I do inside of all of my coaching containers. And right now I am starting my most popular challenge called Sunshine Shred. I'm going to drop the link to that in the show notes below. We start May 27th. There's still time for you to jump in, for you to learn about calorie and macro tracking and all of the different phases and how to sustainably lose weight and keep it off. Otherwise, I will see you in the next episode. Thank you for joining.